While my brothers were being toasted over turkey and wine for inheriting Carter Interiors and Mom's estate, I sat at the edge of the table, ignored like I was part of the wallpaper. Then Uncle Ray slipped me a small envelope and whispered, "Your mother wanted you to have this, not here." That envelope didn't just change Thanksgiving, it changed my entire identity and shattered everything they thought they owned. The late afternoon sun filtered through the tall windows of the Carter family estate, casting warm glows over the mahogany dining table set for 20. I stood just inside the foyer, holding my coat a moment longer than necessary, wondering why I had agreed to come. The familiar scent of roasted turkey and cinnamon-laced sweet potatoes wafted from the kitchen, stirring memories I wasn't sure I missed. Lucas was the first to spot me. He strode across the marble floor in a tailored navy suit that practiced smile plastered across his face. "You made it, Maddie. Mom would have been happy." His hug was brief, polite, the kind you give acquaintances. I mumbled something about the flight from Chicago and stepped past him into the formal dining room where Elliot was already holding court near the fireplace. Elliot, ever the star of the Carter family, was entertaining a group of suited men, their laughter echoing off the high ceilings. He caught sight of me but didn't approach. Instead, he raised his glass slightly, then turned back to his audience. His salt and pepper hair and polished appearance hadn't changed, but the sharpness in his eyes felt colder. I took the last seat at the far end of the table, 2 places down. From Uncle Ray, the only one who seemed genuinely pleased to see me. He leaned in, whispering, "Took you long enough to come home, kiddo." I gave him a tired smile and focused on my napkin, folding and unfolding the edge between my fingers. The room buzzed with conversations I wasn't part of. Someone was talking about a deal Lucas had closed in New York, while another guest gushed about Elliot's recent panel at a financial summit. Patricia's absence was mentioned only once, and even then it felt like a formality. No one spoke about grief or loss, just legacy, business, appearances. A toast was raised halfway through the meal, led by Elliot. "To our mother, the cornerstone of this family. May we honor her by continuing what she built." Glasses clinked, murmurs of agreement followed. I sipped my wine, unsure whether I felt numb or simply unseen. As the meal stretched on, I began to drift. I caught snippets of Lucas discussing expansion plans for Carter Interiors, how they were moving into sustainable design. Someone asked about me, and Lucas casually said I taught music at some charter school in Chicago, then steered the topic back to himself. I didn't correct him. What was the point? Uncle Ray reached into his blazer pocket and slid a small beige envelope across the table toward me. His voice was low, careful. "Your mother left this with me. Said to give it to you today. Don't open it here." My fingers brushed the paper. It was thick, heavier than I expected. I tucked it under my purse and nodded without speaking. He gave me a look I couldn't decipher, maybe pity, maybe guilt. Dessert was served and the conversation turned to estate matters. Elliot hinted at new responsibilities. Lucas chimed in about streamlining operations. I felt like I was watching a play I hadn't auditioned for. Everyone had their roles. I wasn't even in the cast. Later, after most of the guests had left and the help began clearing the table, I stood outside on the veranda, the cold nipping at my bare arms. I watched Elliot laugh with a former senator. Lucas posed for a photo with the board of trustees from some charity. I wondered if they even remembered I existed outside of holidays and awkward family updates. Uncle Ray appeared beside me, holding 2 cups of decaf. He handed me one without a word and looked out at the garden like he had done this 100 times before. "I used to watch you practice piano through that window," he said after a while. "Patricia hated how you played by ear, but I always thought it was beautiful. You never fit into her blueprint." I didn't reply. My eyes were on the envelope inside my purse. When the night ended, I walked back to my rental car under the dim glow of the driveway lights. The envelope sat beside me on the passenger seat as I drove away from the estate. I didn't turn on the radio. I needed the silence. The moment I reached my hotel, I locked the door behind me, dropped my shoes, and sat on the edge of the bed with the envelope in my lap. I stared at it for what felt like hours. Then I reached for the lamp and turned it off. I wasn't ready, not tonight. I barely slept. My body shut down for a few hours, but my mind never stopped running. When the morning light crept through the thin hotel curtains, I sat up with a dry mouth and a pounding heart. The envelope was still where I'd left it on the nightstand. I stared at it again, then finally picked it up and tore it open with both dread and urgency twisting in my chest. Inside were 3 documents. The first one I pulled out was a folded piece of stationery with my mother's handwriting. I recognized the loops and the sharp angles instantly. It felt cold, intimate in a way that startled me. My hands trembled as I unfolded the page and read, "Madison. If you're reading this, then I'm gone and I'm sorry for leaving this until now. There are things I never told you, things I've hidden for too long. You deserve the truth even if it hurts. You are not my biological daughter. You were not born a Carter. Your real name is Madison Moreno. You were born in Texas in the summer of 1987 to a woman named Sarah Moreno. I brought you into this family when you were 4 years old. There are things I cannot undo, but I hope someday you will understand why I did what I did. The truth was always meant to be yours. I never stopped loving you even if I didn't always show it. Please take this and find what you need. Patricia." My breath caught halfway through the letter. I had to reread the first few lines to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. Not a Carter. Madison Moreno. Texas. None of it made sense, and yet it explained everything. The second paper was a birth certificate. The name listed under Mother Sarah Moreno. No father. Birthplace Lubbock, Texas. Date July 19th, 1987. My hands started to shake. I set the letter down and picked up the third paper. A DNA test. It compared 2 samples, mine and Patricia's. Conclusion: no biological relation. I couldn't breathe. I pushed myself off the bed and paced the room, trying to wrap my head around the fact that my entire life had been built on a lie. Patricia wasn't my mother. The Carter name wasn't mine. The childhood I had fought so hard to make sense of suddenly tilted into a new frame of reality. I thought of the piano lessons I had to sneak into. The way Patricia used to roll her eyes when I hummed under my breath at dinner. The time she told me music was a distraction, that real legacy came from structure, not sentiment. I remembered how she lit up at Elliot's first business competition win. How Lucas got a celebration dinner when he was named to a top 40 under 40 list. I remembered being told not to embarrass the family when I wanted to pursue a degree in music education. I remembered the day I was fired from Carter Interiors 3 months after college. The department head pulled me into a quiet conference room, told me it was budget-related, that my role wasn't essential. Patricia wasn't even there. She sent an assistant to clear out my office. Now it all made sense. I was never meant to inherit anything. I was never truly theirs. I had been placed in their lives like a prop in someone else's story. I sat back down, clutching the letter like it was a lifeline. What kind of woman takes someone else's child and raises her as her own, without ever telling the truth? And what kind of life had been stolen from me? I looked up Sarah Moreno's name on my phone. There were a few listings in Texas. A Sarah J. Moreno in Fort Worth. A Sarah Lynn Moreno in Amarillo. I saved them all. I needed more than answers. I needed to see her face. I spent the rest of the day in a daze. I walked aimlessly through the city trying to quiet the panic boiling in my chest. When I returned to the hotel that night, I avoided looking in the mirror. I didn't know whose face was staring back anymore. Around midnight, I called Lucas. He didn't pick up. I left a voicemail, my voice steadier than I felt. "Lucas, I need to talk to you. It's important, not about the company. It's personal. Call me back." I didn't call Elliot. I couldn't. I spent the next morning sorting through my memories, trying to identify moments that felt off. There were too many. The time Patricia flinched when I asked about my baby photos, the quiet tension whenever someone mentioned Texas. The locked drawer in her study that I'd only ever seen her open once. I pulled up my flight app and searched for one-way tickets to Fort Worth. Before I booked anything, I called the number listed under Sarah J. Moreno in Fort Worth. The phone rang 5 times, then went to voicemail. A woman's voice, tired but clear, said, "I've stepped away. Please leave a message." I hung up without saying anything. I wasn't ready, not yet. I returned to the Carter estate 2 days later. Elliot and Lucas were in a meeting, according to the assistant. I waited in the lobby for over an hour until Lucas came down. He looked surprised to see me, but didn't say much. "I need access to Patricia's study," I said. "Why?" He looked guarded. "She left something for me. I need to find out what it means." He hesitated, then motioned for the assistant to let me in. The study was exactly as I remembered it, immaculate, cold, untouched. I walked to the desk and opened the middle drawer. Empty. I opened the second drawer. Files, mostly business. I paused in front of the bottom drawer. It was locked. Lucas handed me a key from the wall cabinet without a word. Inside were a stack of legal documents, a sealed envelope marked confidential, and a dusty file labeled adoption records. I took only one thing, the envelope. I placed it in my purse, nodded to Lucas, and left without another word. That night in my hotel room, I opened it. The name on the papers was mine, Madison Carter. But the legal process didn't exist. There was no adoption decree, no court filings, just forged documents and a handwritten note from Patricia to someone named Dr. Reynolds. I stared at the forged signature, my heart hammering in my chest. There was no adoption. I had been taken. The silence in the room was louder than any scream I had ever heard. I sat perfectly still, holding the forged documents in my lap like they might burn through my hands. I felt weightless and anchored all at once, like the air had been sucked out, and my body was still deciding whether to collapse or run. I didn't know how long I sat there before I finally stood, walked to the sink, and splashed cold water on my face. My reflection looked the same, but nothing felt familiar anymore. I pulled out my phone and dialed the only person I could trust with something this enormous. Sylvia Dawson answered on the second ring, her voice calm and professional as always. "Madison, everything okay?" "No." "Not even close." I told her what I had found: the DNA test, the birth certificate, the forged adoption papers. I told her the name Patricia had left in the letter. Sarah Moreno, Texas, 1991. The name felt foreign and familiar all at once. Sylvia listened without interrupting. When I finished, there was a long pause before she spoke. "That name rings a bell. Let me check something. I want you to stay on the line." I heard her tapping on a keyboard in the background. I paced the room, chewing at the edge of my thumbnail until I tasted blood. "Found it. Sarah Lynn Moreno reported her daughter missing in August of 1991, Lubbock, Texas. It was a national alert case for a few months, but then the file was closed without resolution." Sylvia paused again. That's strange. The case was marked inactive, not solved, and it was sealed in 1996. What does that mean? It means someone shut it down. Unofficially. There's no closure in the file. No recovery, no legal follow-up, no foster placement. Just vanished. I sank onto the edge of the bed. Could Patricia have done that? Had that much reach, maybe. Or maybe someone helped her. These things don't just disappear by accident. Do you think she's still alive? There was another pause. We don't know, but I'll find out. In the meantime, send me copies of everything you have. And Madison, be careful who you talk to. If someone covered this up, they may not want it uncovered. After we hung up, I sat with my laptop and typed in Sarah Moreno's name again, this time with more urgency. I filtered by age, by state, by middle name. I narrowed it down to 3 possible matches. One lived in Fort Worth. I zoomed in on the address. A modest 1-story house with faded shutters and a dry lawn. Something about it tugged at the back of my mind like a door creaking open in a dark hallway. I closed the laptop and laid down, but sleep never came. The next morning, I packed a small overnight bag and rented a car. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. I drove west the highway, stretching out in front of me like a thread unraveling towards something I couldn't name. My chest felt heavy the closer I got to Fort Worth, like the air itself was thickening with memory. Somewhere just outside the city limits, a song came on the radio. Soft piano, a melody I didn't recognize but felt like I had known forever. I pulled over, shut off the engine, and cried, not loud, not violent. Just steady tears rolling down without permission as I watched a field of dry grass ripple in the wind. Something in me was breaking open slowly, irreversibly. When I reached the house, I didn't get out right away. I sat in the car, staring at the front door, trying to summon the courage to knock. I imagined her on the other side. Would she recognize me? Would she even believe me? What if she had moved on? What if she didn't want to know? Then from the corner of my eye, I saw a woman step onto the porch to water a row of wilting plants. Her hair was gray at the temples, pulled back in a neat bun. She wore a faded green sweater and moved with a kind of careful slowness. Like each step cost her something. She turned slightly, and for a brief second our eyes met across the distance. Something inside me jolted. A flash of memory. A warm hand brushing my hair back. A soft voice humming while I fell asleep. A shadow moving across a kitchen floor. It was all fragments, broken and scattered, but real. I watched her go back inside and close the door behind her. I didn't knock. Not yet. I drove to a small diner a few blocks away and ordered coffee I didn't drink. I opened my notebook and began writing everything I could remember. Not facts, feelings, glimpses, the way I used to draw little suns in the margins of everything. The time I got scared during a thunderstorm and someone held me tight, whispering, "It's just the sky talking." The phrase had always felt too strange to be from Patricia. Now I knew it wasn't. I returned to the hotel around sunset, drained and uncertain. I opened the envelope again and reread the letter. The handwriting that once seemed comforting now felt foreign. I folded it carefully, placed it back in the drawer, and turned out the light. The next day I would go back. I would knock. The building hadn't changed. Same sleek glass facade, same marble lobby that smelled faintly of cedar and money. I walked into Carter Interiors with steady steps, holding on to the version of myself they used to see silent, polite, never a threat. But something in my chest pulsed stronger now, steadier. Lucas met me near the elevator with his usual guarded warmth. I hadn't seen him since I asked for access to Patricia's study. He didn't mention that day. Instead, he gestured toward the conference room. I thought we'd talk here. Just a quick catch-up. I smiled tightly. That's fine. I appreciate you making time. He motioned for coffee. I declined. He poured himself a cup and sat across from me, resting one ankle over his knee, like he always did during negotiations. I had watched him do this in boardrooms before I was pushed out. So what's on your mind? You mentioned something about media for the holidays. Yes. I leaned forward slightly. I was thinking we could revive the Winter Artisan Project, highlight local artists' community impact connected to our new line. It aligns with the foundation Mom wanted. Lucas nodded. That's smart. Honestly, since she passed, there's been talk about refreshing our public image. The board would probably support this. I let him speak a little longer before I gently interrupted. To really build something sustainable, we should also revisit the company's origin story. Our legacy, maybe even Patricia's intentions moving forward. Her wishes. Lucas set down his coffee. You mean the trust, not just that. I paused. I've been thinking about her estate, what she would have wanted. Did she leave a revised will? His brow tightened. Not that I've seen. Elliot's been handling most of the legal channels. Convenient. I kept my tone neutral. Would it be possible to see what's in the estate file just so I can be aligned when building the holiday campaign? Lucas didn't answer immediately. He studied me like he was trying to read between my lines. Then he stood. Follow me. We walked to the administrative wing. Lucas nodded to the office manager, who retrieved a locked case from the file room. Lucas carried it into a smaller conference room and opened it in front of me. Inside were neatly labeled folders. I flipped through until I found a manila envelope labeled Estate Patricia Carter. I glanced at Lucas. May I? He nodded. I opened the folder slowly. Inside were two wills. The older one, dated 2015, left the estate to Elliot and Lucas in equal parts. The newer one, signed in October 2022, was marked unexecuted. But it had Patricia's signature, and Uncle Ray's, and mine. My breath caught. I hadn't remembered signing anything. But there it was, a witness signature beside my name. I traced the ink with my finger, remembering the charity gala last fall, the rushed document I signed in the kitchen, barely reading it. The 2022 document left everything House Investments Company shares to me. I swallowed hard. Lucas leaned over. I didn't know this existed. She never said anything, no. He looked stunned but not angry, just thrown. I turned the page. Attached was a handwritten letter. Madison has always understood the soul of this company. If anything happens to me, I trust her to carry our name forward with purpose. The rest of the page blurred as tears welled up. I blinked them away quickly. Lucas sat back. So what happens now? I folded the document carefully. That depends. Was this ever submitted to the probate office? I doubt it. If it had been, we'd know. I think Elliot's attorney filed the old will. I closed the folder and slid it back into the case. This one needs to be submitted. Lucas nodded slowly. I'll back you up. If this is what she wanted, then it's what we do. I looked up at him, unsure if I believed him fully. But there was no malice in his eyes. Just the same weariness I'd always seen when he dealt with Elliot. Thank you. Later that evening, I called Uncle Ray. He answered on the second ring. I found the new will. Your name is on it. He didn't respond right away. Then he sighed. I thought she'd filed it. She told me she would. Why didn't you say anything? Because I wasn't sure she had followed through. And I didn't want to start a war without proof. You were there when she signed it. I was. Ray's voice softened. She knew she hadn't been fair to you. She said this was her way of setting things right. I sat on the edge of the hotel bed, staring at the city lights beyond the window. I believe you. He cleared his throat. Do what you need to do, Maddie. I'll testify if it comes to that. When I hung up, I stared at the photo on my nightstand. One of the few I'd brought with me. Me as a teenager between Lucas and Patricia at the holiday party. I had always looked out of place in that frame, but now the truth pulled everything into focus. I wasn't trying to steal a legacy. I was reclaiming what had been hidden beneath a polished floor for far too long. The cold air nipped at my skin as I stepped out of the rental car, my fingers gripping the envelope, with the new will like it might anchor me. The house looked the same as before, modest and quiet, with wind chimes tapping summerly against the porch rail. I walked up the steps, heart pounding so loudly I thought it might echo through the street. Before I could knock, the front door opened. She stood there, one hand on the frame, the other holding a dish towel. Her eyes were the same soft brown as mine, rimmed red, like she'd been crying or maybe just hadn't slept well in days. The lines on her face were deeper than I remembered from the photo I'd found in the sealed file, but the shape was still there. I saw pieces of myself in her, and it hit me like a wave. I didn't even have to say my name. Sarah. She didn't speak. Her lips parted slightly and her eyes darted across my face like she was checking a dream for details. I felt my breath catch. It's me. Madison. Her knees buckled and I stepped forward, instinctively catching her elbow. She reached out with trembling hands, cupping my face as if afraid I might vanish if she blinked. I thought I'd never see you again, she whispered. We stood there for a long time, tears slipping down her cheeks as she pulled me into her arms. Her embrace was nothing like Patricia's. It was desperate, full of memory and longing and years of unanswered prayers. I clung to her even though part of me still didn't know how to feel. Inside, the house smelled like old wood and lavender. She led me to the kitchen where a kettle whistled on the stove. She turned it off with shaky hands and sat across from me at the small table. I tried for years, she said quietly. I went to every agency, every police station. I sent letters to the address they told me Patricia Carter had used. Most of them came back unopened. One time, someone from her legal team sent a cease and desist. Told me I was harassing her. Why didn't you go public? I tried. No one would listen. They said I had no proof, that maybe I was mistaken. And eventually the case was closed without a word. She reached under a stack of magazines and pulled out a faded red folder. Inside were copies of the original missing persons report, a few old newspaper clippings, and several return-to-sender letters with Carter Interiors stamped in the corner. They said they closed it because there was no evidence of a crime. But I knew you were taken. I leafed through the documents, numb. My name on the missing report, the black and white photo of a 4-year-old girl with pigtails and wide eyes. The same eyes staring back at me in the mirror every morning. Do you remember anything? She asked gently. Bits and pieces, mostly feelings. I remember being told not to talk about before. I remember asking about my birth mom and getting punished. There was always this fear around the question, like something terrible would happen if I pushed. She looked down at her hands, now folded tightly in her lap. You were always sensitive. You hated the dark, loved music. I used to play piano in the evenings and you'd fall asleep right on the carpet by the bench. I used to think your heartbeat followed the rhythm. I blinked fast, the image lodging somewhere deep in my chest. I remembered that carpet, the piano, the way the floor felt cool under my cheek. I hadn't known where it came from until now. Do you still play? Not much anymore. Arthritis got to my hands. She smiled softly, then reached out and took mine. Her grip was weak but warm. I'm so proud of who you became. Even if I wasn't there to see it, I didn't know how to respond. I had spent years trying to prove myself to a family that never truly saw me, and now the woman who had loved me first was sitting in front of me telling me I didn't need to prove anything. I don't even know what name to use anymore, I said finally. She tilted her head. You're still you, whatever name you carry. I let the silence sit for a while before I pulled out the folder from my purse. I found this. It's a copy of a new will Patricia signed before she passed. She left everything to me. Sarah didn't flinch. She just looked tired. Of course she did. She knew what she did. She knew what it cost. You're not angry? She shook her head. I've carried every kind of anger you can imagine. It eats away at you. I've had 30 years to scream into pillows and write letters that went nowhere. Now I just want peace. I want to know you're okay. I swallowed hard. I'm not sure I am, but I'm working on it. She stood and went to the cabinet. From inside, she retrieved another folder, thicker, darker. She set it on the table in front of me. This is everything I have. The police reports, the private investigator's notes, the letters I sent. Maybe someone will care now that you're back. I looked at her. I do. She smiled again, tears filling her eyes. That's enough for me. I left just after sunset. The sky was streaked with orange and deep blue. As I stood on her porch, she reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind my ear like it was the most natural thing in the world. Come back when you're ready, she said. This will always be your home if you want it. I nodded, unable to speak. Driving away felt like tearing something open, but also like stitching something together. I didn't know how to hold both those feelings at once, but I let them sit side by side as I headed back toward everything that had once felt solid and now felt hollow. I wasn't just reclaiming a name. I was reclaiming a life. 3 days after I returned from Texas, Sylvia filed a petition with the Superior Court in Richmond. It was formal, precise, and loaded with legal weight. Alongside the petition was a motion to unseal the Moreno file and reclassify my identity under my birth name, Madison Lynn Marino. The court scheduled a hearing within the month. In the meantime, a new court-supervised DNA test was ordered. I sat in a sterile room at a government clinic watching the technicians swab the inside of my cheek like it was any other appointment. I had done this once before, but this time it was official. Binding. Protected by the system that once failed to find me. Sarah's sample had already been sent in. They would compare us directly. No room for private interpretations or family denials. The technician sealed the sample and handed it to the courier. I watched the package disappear down the hallway, and I knew there would be no going back after this. News traveled fast. Elliot must have caught wind through one of his contacts at the courthouse. Within a week, articles started appearing online, seeded by freelance reporters I had never heard of. They weren't just questioning the legitimacy of my story. They were questioning my sanity. Music teacher claims to be missing heiress. Alleged victim or master manipulator, Carter family feud, woman accused of exploiting grief for inheritance. The worst one quoted an anonymous source from the Carter Foundation board who claimed I had always been unstable, jealous, and prone to fabrications. It included a photo of me from college taken at a protest. My mouth was open mid-chant, my face twisted in passion. They used it to paint me as unhinged. Parents at the charter school where I taught began calling the administration. By the following Monday, I was placed on indefinite leave. No investigation, just a polite phone call from the headmaster expressing concern about the publicity and safety of the learning environment. I didn't argue. There was nothing to say that wouldn't sound like desperation. Sylvia urged me to stay quiet until the hearing, but silence felt like consent. The damage was mounting by the hour. I received emails with subject lines like liar and gold digger. My social media was flooded with strangers accusing me of manipulating a dead woman's legacy. So I set up my phone in the living room, filling a simple backdrop. No makeup, no script. Just me and the truth. I went live on a Tuesday night. I didn't introduce myself the way the articles did. I didn't defend or plead. I told a story about a girl who always felt like a guest in her own home, about piano lessons in secret, about being pushed out of a family business without explanation, about a letter that changed everything. I held up the original birth certificate. I showed the sealed case documents from 1991. I told them about Sarah, her letters, the sealed investigation, the day I looked into a stranger's eyes and saw my own childhood reflected back. They say I'm lying because I didn't come forward sooner. I said my voice tight. But how do you come forward with the truth you were never allowed to know? I didn't cry. I didn't need to. By morning, the video had over 200,000 views. Local news picked it up. A journalist from a reputable outlet reached out for verification. Sylvia handled the correspondence and sent over the court filings. For the first time in weeks, my inbox held more support than hate. Lucas called me later that afternoon. His voice was cautious, but he didn't sound surprised. I didn't know Elliot would go this far. He always does what it takes to win. You're not alone in this, Maddie. I know we haven't always stopped. I didn't want comfort from someone who stayed quiet until the tide turned. He paused. I'll testify about the will. I'll back you at the hearing. I wanted to believe he meant it. That night I went to the post office to check a box I had set up under my legal name. Inside was a single envelope, no return address. I opened it right there at the counter. Inside was a copy of the 1996 letter Sarah had sent to Patricia, the one that was returned unopened. There was also a typed note unsigned. They knew, and they kept you anyway. I drove home in silence, the letter on the passenger seat beside me like a passenger itself. The system was moving now. Slowly, but it was moving, and so was I. Uncle Ray showed up at my apartment the next morning holding a small leather briefcase and wearing the kind of expression I had only seen on him at funerals. He didn't ask to come in. He just looked at me for a long second and then said quietly, "I think it's time I stop hiding." I stepped aside and he walked in his steps, slow but deliberate. We sat at the kitchen table, the same place I had reviewed the birth certificate, and stared down the past. He placed the briefcase on the table and unlocked it. Inside were 3 documents. One was a notarized copy of Patricia's 2022 will. The other 2 were sealed affidavits, one with his name on it, the other with the name Dr. Mila Reynolds. She was the obstetrician who signed your birth certificate back in Texas. She retired years ago. But she sent this after I reached out last week. Said she couldn't sleep anymore. He slid the affidavit toward me. She was threatened. He nodded. 2 men came to her office late one evening in 1991. Said if she didn't backdate the birth certificate and remove the maternal hospital record, her medical license would be under review. She was scared. She complied, but she kept a journal. That's what she gave me. I opened the document. It detailed a timeline that matched Sarah's story exactly. The birth, the missing hospital file, the pressure to stay silent. It was chilling to read it in someone else's handwriting, someone who had no reason to lie. Why didn't you say anything sooner? Because I was a coward, Ray said. Patricia wasn't always like that, you know. When she was young, she was full of fire, compassion. But after the divorce and after your father died, something in her hardened. She became obsessed with legacy, with controlling the narrative, and I went along. Because I loved her. Because I thought maybe I could protect you better from the inside. You could have told me. He looked down. I didn't think you'd believe me. I barely believed myself for a while. The next morning, Sylvia held a press conference at the courthouse steps. It wasn't dramatic, just precise. She read through the findings, the verified DNA match, the affidavit from Dr. Reynolds, the evidence of intimidation. She spoke of a girl taken from her home and buried inside a lie so carefully constructed that even the legal system didn't catch it. Reporters swarmed her with questions. She only answered one. Why now? Because the truth always waits for the right time. That afternoon, the tide began to shift. Headlines changed tone. Outlets that had smeared me began requesting interviews to clarify. A journalist from the Post called me personally asking if I'd be open to telling my story for a long-form piece. I told her I'd think about it. Later that night, Lucas called. I hesitated before picking up, but I did. I saw the press conference, he said. And I believe you. I think I always did. I just didn't want to believe the rest of it. There was a pause. I waited. When we were kids, I remember you asking questions about where you came from, about why you didn't have baby pictures. Patricia used to get so angry. She said you were being ungrateful. I remember. I should have spoken up back then. I didn't understand it all, but I knew something didn't add up. And when I found the second will after she passed, I thought about burning it. Honestly, I did. Why didn't you? Because for once I wanted to see what would happen if I didn't try to fix things in secret. If I let the truth come out on its own. I leaned against the kitchen counter, the phone warm against my ear. Thank you for not burning it. He exhaled slowly. I don't know how this ends, Maddie. Elliot's not going to back down, and the board is already panicking. Let them panic. You're different now. No, I'm the same person. I just finally know who that is. There was silence on the line, then a soft click as he hung up. The next morning, I found an envelope slipped under my door, no name, no return address, just a single sheet of paper inside. It read, "Some secrets are meant to stay buried. Keep digging and you'll find out why." The courthouse loomed gray against the December sky, tall and cold like it had no intention of bending for anyone. I stood outside for a long moment, the wind tugging at the hem of my coat, watching reporters gather on the steps. Sylvia stood beside me, calm and unreadable as ever. She gave me a small nod, then motioned for us to go inside. The courtroom was smaller than I expected, with polished benches and a judge who looked like she hadn't smiled in 10 years. My hands trembled slightly as I sat down at the plaintiff's table, but I forced them into my lap and locked my spine straight. Elliot walked in 5 minutes later alone. No lawyer, no assistant. Just him in a tailored suit and that cold, smug look I had seen my whole life. His eyes passed over me like I was a painting he never liked but was forced to hang anyway. The judge called the session to order. Sylvia opened with the timeline, the missing person report from 1991. The sealed investigation, the DNA results, the affidavits. Her voice didn't waver once. When she handed the judge the folder with the original will, she placed it down like a final piece in a jigsaw puzzle that could no longer be denied. Dr. Reynolds testified via video. Her voice cracked once when she spoke about the night she was threatened. She apologized to me directly. I nodded but couldn't speak. Uncle Ray took the stand next. His hands shook as he read his statement. He confessed to everything, keeping the will, staying silent, watching the family splinter without stepping in. Then Elliot rose. He walked to the center of the room like a man addressing a boardroom, not a courtroom. "This is an elaborate con," he said. "Sarah Moreno manipulated this woman, fabricated documents, exploited our grief. My mother was a brilliant but fragile woman. She was easily swayed in her final year. This will is a forgery. This whole story is a media stunt. He turned to me. Madison always felt left out. She hated that we succeeded where she did not. She resented that our mother loved us more. This is her revenge. I didn't move. Sylvia stood again. She held up the court-certified DNA report. With all due respect, Your Honor, no amount of resentment could fabricate genetics. The judge asked Elliot if he had any material evidence to counter the documents. He said no. She asked if he intended to call witnesses. He said no. She asked again if he wanted counsel. He declined. Then she looked down at her bench and began reading. In the matter of estate transfer, the court recognizes the 2022 will of Patricia Ann Carter as valid and enforceable. All assets are to be transferred to Madison Lynn Moreno, biological daughter of Sarah Ann Moreno, as indicated in the notarized document and confirmed by forensic authentication. The courtroom went still. The judge continued. Furthermore, the court acknowledges the reclassification of the 1991 case as an unsolved kidnapping. Ms. Moreno is hereby recognized as the legal identity of the minor previously reported missing. I couldn't breathe. It was done. I turned to look at Elliot. His face was pale, clenched, unreadable for the first time. He didn't say a word. He just stood and walked out of the courtroom, his shoes echoing off the marble floor. Lucas stayed seated. His head was down, hands folded, no protest in his posture. When he looked up at me, his eyes were wet but clear. Outside, the cold hit me like a second verdict. Reporters surged forward, shouting questions, flashes popping. Sylvia guided me past them, hand firm on my back. "How do you feel?" one asked. But I didn't answer because I wasn't sure yet. The morning after the verdict, headlines spread faster than I could keep up. Legacy lies at Carter Interiors, heiress or hostage, truth shatters a dynasty. The media called it a modern tragedy, a southern soap opera, a courtroom reckoning. To me, it was just Tuesday. Within a week, 3 of Carter Interiors' biggest contracts were terminated. One design firm in San Diego cited ethical concerns. A retail chain in Atlanta claimed breach of representation. The financial department scrambled to recover, but the damage was done. The board called an emergency vote and removed Lucas as acting CEO. Temporarily, they said, public confidence needed a new name, a new direction. They had no idea that I would soon be the one signing their checks. Elliot's fall came faster. The Virginia State Bar suspended his license pending a full review. Then came the civil suits, one from Sarah for defamation, another from Sylvia's firm for obstruction of justice. A third lawsuit emerged from a private investor who had been misled about the company's stability. I heard he tried to cut a deal with the board to return in exchange for silence. They laughed him out of the room. He stopped answering calls, disappeared from the public eye. I didn't chase his name in the news. I didn't need to. The trust fund Patricia had built was put under review. Her donations to the family foundation had been categorized under tax-exempt art investments. Now they looked more like money laundering. A forensic accountant was hired. I let them do their work without interference. When the board approached me formally to assume full ownership and leadership of Carter Interiors, they did so cautiously, half expecting me to demand retribution. But I had already made my decision. I met them in the main conference room beneath a portrait of Patricia that once hung over the fireplace at home. "Thank you for the vote of confidence," I said, "but there will be conditions." They sat up straighter. "First, I want all philanthropic contributions to be audited and redirected toward missing persons support networks." Agreed. "Second, I will not restore the Carter name to the design line." A pause. Someone cleared their throat. "We could consider a dual brand." "No. I'm not here to co-brand my identity with my trauma." They didn't argue after that. That night, Lucas came to see me. He stood awkwardly at the threshold of my new office, a place that once belonged to the woman who raised us both. "You busy always, but come in." He sat across from me, looking older than I remembered. Or maybe just more honest. "I owe you more than an apology." I didn't respond. I didn't just stay quiet out of fear, he said. I stayed quiet because it benefited me. Because I liked being the golden sun, and I hated the thought of all of it being a lie. I let the silence stretch. She raised me too, Maddie, but she didn't love us the same, and I knew it. I just didn't want to lose the version of her I believed in. "You didn't lose her. You're just seeing her clearly." He nodded. "I don't expect forgiveness. I hope I can help you build whatever comes next." I studied him. The weight in his eyes wasn't performative. It wasn't PR. It was something heavier. "Then show up when it's hard, not just when it's over." He nodded again. Then he stood and left. I stayed in that office until long after the lights shut off down the hall. I took Patricia's portrait off the wall and leaned it against a chair. I didn't burn it. I didn't shred it. But I didn't hang it back up either. Some legacies are best rewritten, not restored, and I was ready to start from zero. Spring in Fort Worth felt different than I remembered. Maybe because I had never truly been here, not as myself. The breeze carried less weight, the sky opened wider, or maybe I had just stopped holding my breath. I moved into Sarah's guest house 3 weeks after the court ruling. It was small, with chipped paint on the porch rails and a stubborn faucet in the bathroom, but it was warm. Hers was the only home that had ever felt like it could be mine. Sarah gave me space. She didn't hover or ask too many questions. Some mornings we had coffee in silence. Other days, she'd hum songs from the radio while folding laundry. Slowly, gently, she gave me back the pieces of my own childhood. I left my job at the school. Officially, it was a leave of absence. Unofficially, I didn't know if I'd go back. Instead, I opened a music program for foster kids and teens who'd aged out of the system. We met in a dusty community center on the east side of town where someone's grandma brought us lemonade and kids banged out chords like their hands were on fire. One boy, Isaiah, couldn't read music but could pick out harmonies by ear. Another Tory wrote lyrics that would break your heart. They didn't care who I used to be. They only cared that I showed up. Then one afternoon, Lucas called. I let it go to voicemail at first. When he called again 2 hours later, I answered. "I'm not calling about business," he said. "Okay. Well, not exactly." I waited. "We're thinking about starting something new. A nonprofit. Interior design for transitional housing and shelters. Partnering with local artists, offering jobs to at-risk youth. A real rebuild. From scratch. That's a lot of moving parts." "I know. Which is why I wanted to ask if you'd consider being part of it." Not for Carter Interiors. For something else. Something clean. I sat on the front steps with the phone to my ear, watching the light shift across the lawn. You think people would trust us? Maybe not right away, but maybe they don't have to. Maybe it's not about us. I didn't answer right away. Later that night, I sat at the kitchen table with Sarah, the same place we'd cried over old photographs and burned casseroles. I told her about the idea, about the call. "You don't have to say yes," she said, "but you also don't have to say no out of habit." I smiled. She reached across the table and took my hand. "I'm proud of you, Maddie. Not for winning anything, just for being you." That night I lay in bed with the window cracked open, letting the sounds of the street slip in. I thought about what I had lost, a version of childhood, a family name, years I could never get back. But I thought about what I had found too, my real mother, my voice, my name, Madison Lynn Moreno. It tasted solid now, like something I had earned. I didn't know yet if I would say yes to Lucas, but I knew I could, because for the first time in my life I didn't feel like I was pretending to belong. I met Lucas at a small cafe near the courthouse, the same place we'd once gone to with Patricia when we were kids. Back then it had seemed like a reward. Now it felt like a negotiation table, but without the coldness. He was already there, suit jacket off, sleeves rolled up. No press, no handlers. Just two people trying to rebuild something they never had a chance to build right the first time. He stood when he saw me. "Thanks for coming." I nodded and sat down. "Let's skip the pleasantries." He smiled, almost nervous. I laid out my terms quickly. The foundation would not carry the Carter name alone. Patricia's legacy, financial or otherwise, would not define it. I wanted transparency, real partnerships, full accountability. Programs focused on recovery, education, and prevention for children who had been taken, abandoned, or never found. And I wanted it to be national, not just regional. Lucas listened without interrupting. Then he leaned forward. "Moreno Carter Foundation. The order matters." "Yes, it does." "Done." It was too easy. I blinked. Just like that. He looked down, then back up. "I've been waiting for something that felt worth doing. This does. You've earned it, and maybe I get to be part of something good for once." We spent the next few days working through paperwork with Sylvia, outlining the board structure and mission statement. Sarah reviewed everything twice and added a clause about long-term mental health resources. Uncle Ray agreed to help with state-level outreach, quietly but fully present. The day we signed the incorporation papers, we did it in the living room of Sarah's house. No cameras, no champagne, just hands and pens and quiet resolve. Lucas wore his old college sweatshirt. I wore a plain gray blouse. Sylvia brought a bakery pie half-eaten before we got to the final signature. Uncle Ray handed me a fountain pen Patricia once gifted him and said she would have fought it, but deep down she knew this was coming. Sarah didn't cry until the very end, and when she did, it was the kind of cry that comes with relief, not sadness. Her arms around me felt like a circle closing. When it was done, we sat in the backyard watching the sky fade into dusk. It was calm, unremarkable, and somehow that made it perfect. Lucas raised a glass of iced tea. "To starting over. No speeches," I warned. He laughed. "To making things better, then." I clinked my glass against his. "For them. For all of us." Later, when everyone had gone, I stood alone in the kitchen and opened the last drawer in the sideboard. Inside was the original letter Patricia had written me, the one that started it all. I had kept it unread since that first night. I unfolded it slowly, the paper softer now from age and handling. "Madison," it began. "I don't expect forgiveness, but I want you to know the truth." I didn't read the rest, not yet, maybe not ever. Because forgiveness wasn't something I needed to give to move forward. The truth had already found me, and that was enough. A year later, the smell of cinnamon and roasted garlic filled Sarah's kitchen. Outside, the leaves in Fort Worth had turned a muted gold, and a crisp wind curled around the edge of the porch where Lucas strung up a few fairy lights, more crooked than festive, but no one minded. Inside, I basted the turkey while humming a tune Isaiah had composed last week in class. Tori and her sister were setting the table, arguing about the placement of the pie. In the corner, Sarah mashed sweet potatoes, humming along. Her laughter was quieter now, but real. This time last year, I had walked into a room full of people who only saw the version of me that made them comfortable. Now I was surrounded by people who had chosen to see me whole. Lucas brought in another folding chair and shrugged when I raised an eyebrow. "You invited half the block," he said. "You brought half the block," I corrected him. Guilty. When the last dish hit the table, I stood still for a moment and let it sink in. The light, the warmth, the easy noise of belonging. Everyone quieted when I lifted my glass. The room held its breath. Last year I said I was handed a small envelope during dinner. A quiet thing. Paper, ink, and questions I didn't know how to answer. It broke something open. Lucas looked down. Sarah reached across the table and took my hand. That envelope shattered the life I thought I had, I continued. But it also gave me something I didn't even know I was missing. A name, a family, a truth I had ached for my entire life. There was a long pause. No one rushed it. This Thanksgiving I know who I am. I am Madison Lynn Moreno, and I am grateful. Grateful not just for what I've gained, but for what I've learned to let go of. I raised my glass higher. To second chances, to truth, to the family we find and the ones we build. They raised theirs too, and we drank. Later, as the candles burned low and the last of the pie disappeared, I stepped out onto the porch. The sky above was velvet and still. Some stories are written in quartz and signed in ink. Others are written in scars, in questions that don't get answered right away. Mine had both. My story isn't about an inheritance. It's about a stolen identity, a truth buried for years, a name I had to fight to remember. If you're out there wondering where you belong, if the ground beneath you doesn't quite feel like home, believe this. Truth has a way of finding you. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow. But when it comes, it will come with clarity, and you will finally exhale. Thank you for listening to my story. If it resonated with you, or if you know someone who needs to hear it, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps bring more real stories like this to life. Let's keep reminding each other that healing is possible, always.